He didn't just crash into my fence. He sat in the driver's seat, smirking, while the splintered wood lay scattered across my lawn like broken bones. I hadn't even stepped outside before the HOA president, his mother, was already on the phone, not with an apology, but with the police. Her son had driven straight through my property, and somehow I was the one being blamed. "Your fence was too close to the curb," she said, as if that justified the tire marks gouged into my garden. The officer looked at me, then at her, then back at the wreckage. I braced myself for the worst. But then something shifted. A quiet moment, a glance at the registration, and suddenly the narrative cracked. They tried to pin the damage on me. They tried to twist the rules, twist the truth, and twist the law. But what they didn't know was that I had every citation, every photo, every email, and I wasn't backing down. So when the tow truck rolled in and hooked his car instead of mine, I didn't say a word. Because this wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was about exposing everything they'd buried beneath it. What happens when the HOA's golden boy crashes into the wrong neighbor's life? For the Ellisons, Sycamore Ridge was supposed to be the final stop. Mark, a civil engineer with a quiet temperament, and Dana, a part-time art teacher with a love for gardening, had spent years bouncing between rentals and noisy neighborhoods. When they found the modest two-story home tucked at the end of a cul-de-sac, it felt like a reward. The backyard was just big enough for a swing set and a vegetable patch. The front lawn sloped gently toward the street, bordered by a sturdy wooden fence Mark had built himself, measured to code, painted to match the shutters, and sealed against the summer rains. Their two kids, Ellie and Jonah, rode bikes up and down the sidewalk. Dana planted roses and marigolds along the fence line. Mark spent weekends sanding wood in the shed, listening to old jazz records while the smell of cedar filled the air. It was quiet, predictable, peaceful, until the car hit the fence. But that moment hadn't come yet. Before the crash, before the citations, before the accusations, there was Karen. Karen lived 3 houses down. HOA president, retired real estate agent, known for her lemon bars and her laminated rulebook. She had a son, Tyler, 21, still living at home, driving a silver sports car with tinted windows and a muffler that rattled the windows every time he sped past. Mark didn't mind the noise. Not at first. He figured Tyler was just young, restless. But Dana noticed things. The way Karen always parked her car just slightly over the line. The way Tyler revved his engine outside their house late at night. The way the HOA newsletter started including oddly specific reminders. All fences must maintain a minimum setback from the curb. Unregistered vehicles may be subject to towing. Residents must not obstruct community visibility. Mark shrugged it off. Dana didn't. Then came the first letter. It was folded neatly, slipped into their mailbox, stamped with the HOA seal. Your fence may be in violation of community setback guidelines. Please submit documentation within 14 days. Mark measured the fence again. It was fine. He sent in the paperwork. No response. 2 weeks later, a second letter arrived. This time, it was about visual obstruction. Dana's flower beds were too dense. The swing set was not visible from the street. The shed was unregistered. Mark started keeping copies. He labeled a folder, HOA nonsense. Still, they tried to stay neighborly. They waved. They smiled. They attended the monthly meetings, even brought cookies once. Karen nodded politely, but never made eye contact. Tyler didn't speak at all. Then one afternoon, Mark came home to find tire marks across the lawn. He followed them to the fence, a deep gash in the wood, splinters scattered like shrapnel. The silver sports car was parked crookedly in Karen's driveway, front bumper dented, paint streaked with cedar. Mark knocked on her door. Karen opened it, phone already in hand. "I've called the police," she said. "Your fence is too close to the curb. It's a hazard." Mark blinked. "Your son drove through my yard." Karen didn't flinch. "And your fence caused damage to his vehicle." The officer arrived 20 minutes later. Tyler stood beside the car, arms crossed, sunglasses on. Dana held the HOA letters in her hands, trembling. Mark explained everything. Measurements, setbacks, the previous citations. The officer listened, nodded, took notes. Then he walked over to the car, checked the registration, checked the insurance, checked the plates, and paused. Mark didn't know what the officer saw, but something shifted. The tone, the posture, the silence. Karen's voice rose. This is a community matter. The HOA will handle it. The officer shook his head. This is a civil matter. And right now, it looks like your son's vehicle is unregistered. Karen's face went pale. Tyler muttered something under his breath. The officer called for a tow. Mark didn't say a word. He just stood there, watching as the silver car was hooked and hauled away, past the broken fence, past the flower beds, past the neighbors who had started to gather. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because the next morning, Mark received a letter. Due to recent events, your property is now under review for multiple violations. Failure to comply may result in fines, enforcement action, or legal escalation. Signed, Karen, President, Sycamore Ridge HOA. The morning after Tyler's car was towed, Mark found a new envelope taped to his front door. No postage, no pleasantries, just a printed notice from the HOA. Your property is now under review for multiple violations. Failure to comply may result in fines, enforcement action, or legal escalation. Dana read it twice. They're retaliating, she said. Mark didn't want to believe it, but the signs were everywhere. That afternoon, a man in a reflective vest walked the perimeter of their yard with a clipboard. He didn't knock, didn't speak, just measured, scribbled, and left. The next day, Mark received a citation for non-standard fencing materials. The fence he'd built himself, sealed, painted, and previously approved, was suddenly inconsistent with community aesthetics. Fine, $350. He appealed. The board denied it. Then came the noise complaint. Tyler had revved his engine past their house at 11:42 p.m. Mark had video footage, time-stamped. But the complaint wasn't against Tyler, it was against Mark. Resident created disturbance by engaging in hostile gestures toward passing vehicles. Fine, $200. Mark was stunned. Dana was furious. She started documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, letters. They created a binder, labeled it HOA War. The next week, a second citation arrived. This time for unauthorized garden structures. Dana's raised beds, built from reclaimed wood, tucked neatly behind the fence, were deemed unsightly. Fine, $400. Mark requested a hearing. The board scheduled it for 9 a.m. on a weekday. He asked to reschedule. They refused. He submitted a written statement. They rejected it. In-person attendance required, the letter read. He missed the hearing. The fine doubled. Now, they were over $1,500 in the hole. Mark started asking questions. He requested the HOA's bylaws. They sent a heavily redacted version. Entire sections blacked out. He asked for the full document. They said it was under review. Then came the surveillance pole, installed 6 feet from their bedroom window. No notice, no explanation, just a tall, black pole with a blinking red light. Mark called the board. No answer. He emailed. No reply. He asked a neighbor. They shrugged. Karen said it was for safety. Mark installed his own camera. Motion activated. Discreet. Within 48 hours, he received another citation. Unauthorized security equipment. Fine, $500. He appealed. Denied. Dana wanted to go public. Mark wasn't ready. Let me try one more thing, he said. He filed a formal complaint with the county. The board retaliated. They sent a letter to every resident on the street, warning of a homeowner engaging in disruptive legal activity. They didn't name Mark, But everyone knew. Linda stopped waving. The couple across the street canceled their dinner plans. Even the mailman started dropping letters at the edge of the driveway. Mark was being frozen out. Then the board made their boldest move yet. They issued a community safety directive banning all backyard structures not visible from the street. That included Mark's shed. The same shed that held Mark's tools, his woodworking projects, and the swing set supplies. He had 7 days to dismantle it. Mark refused. On day 8, he came home to find a notice taped to his garage. HOA enforcement action pending. That night, Mark heard footsteps in the yard. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. No one was there, but the shed door was open, and the lock was gone. He called the police. They said it was a civil matter. Mark was furious. He started digging. He found out Karen had rewritten several HOA rules without a community vote. He discovered that the board had quietly raised annual dues by 18%, again, without approval. He found emails between board members discussing problematic residents and strategies for compliance. Mark printed everything. He built a case. Then he got a letter from the HOA attorney. It accused him of defamation, threatened legal action, demanded he cease all unauthorized investigations. Mark didn't flinch. He filed a countersuit. The board panicked. They called an emergency meeting. Mark showed up with his binder, his documents, and a quiet fury that made Karen visibly sweat. He read aloud the redacted bylaws. He quoted the county code. He showed photos of the shed, the swing set, the drone. Then he dropped the bombshell. "I've filed a formal complaint with the state HOA Oversight Committee," he said. "And I've retained counsel." Silence. Karen tried to speak. Mark cut her off. "You've harassed my family. You violated your own rules. And you've weaponized this board against anyone who dares to question you." The room was dead quiet. Then someone clapped. It was Linda. Then another neighbor. Then another. Karen slammed her folder shut. Meeting adjourned. But it wasn't. Because the next morning, Mark received a call from the county inspector. The HOA's charter was being reviewed. The board's authority was suspended pending investigation. And Karen? She was being summoned for a deposition. Mark walked outside, binder in hand, and looked at the shed, still standing. The swing set, untouched. The drone hadn't returned. The surveillance pole had been quietly removed. But the war wasn't over, because buried in the anonymous emails was one final document, a proposal, signed by Karen, to seize Mark's property under eminent domain for a community expansion project. It had never been approved, never voted on, but it was real, and it was dated 2 weeks before the first fine. Mark stared at it, heart pounding. They hadn't just wanted to punish him. They wanted his land. And now he had proof. The fallout from the hearing was immediate. Within 48 hours, the County HOA Oversight Committee launched a formal investigation. Mark's binder, once a quiet act of defiance, became the centerpiece of a case that would ripple far beyond Sycamore Ridge. The audio recording of Karen, the spreadsheet of compliance targets, the redacted bylaws, the surveillance pole, it was all submitted, cataloged, and reviewed. Neighbors who had once kept their heads down now leaned in. Linda organized a petition demanding transparency. The couple across the street, who had once canceled dinner plans, knocked on Mark's door with a tray of brownies and an apology. Even the mailman stopped at the porch again. Karen tried to rally support. She sent out a community-wide email claiming the board was under attack by a resident with a personal vendetta. But the damage was done. The spreadsheet had circulated. The audio clip had gone viral in the neighborhood group chat. And the proposal to seize Mark's property for a community expansion project, dated before any fines were issued, had shattered any illusion of fairness. The board fractured. 2 members resigned within days. One issued a public apology. Another admitted they'd been pressured into silence. Karen, meanwhile, lawyered up. But her attorney couldn't stop what came next. The county froze the HOA's authority pending the outcome of the audit. All fines were suspended. All enforcement actions halted. And Mark? He was asked to testify. He stood before the oversight committee, binder in hand, and told the story from beginning to end. The crash, the citations, the surveillance, the retaliation, the silence. He didn't cry, but Dana did, quietly in the back row. When he finished, the lead inspector leaned forward. "Mr. Ellison, thank you. You've done more than defend your home. You've exposed a system that failed its residents." The committee ruled in Mark's favor. All fines were nullified. The board was dissolved. A temporary administrator was appointed to manage the HOA until new elections could be held. And Karen? She was barred from serving on any HOA board in the state for 10 years. But the impact didn't stop there. Mark's story spread. Local news picked it up. Then regional outlets. Then a national podcast on property rights and HOA abuse. He was invited to speak at a homeowners advocacy summit. His binder, once a symbol of frustration, became a case study in civic resistance. Neighbors who had once avoided him now stopped to chat. Linda brought over cookies. The couple across the street apologized. Even the mailman started walking up the driveway again. Dana replanted her flower beds. The swing set stayed. The shed got a fresh coat of paint. And the drone? It never came back. But the most powerful change wasn't in the yard. It was in the community. Residents started asking questions. They demanded transparency. They formed a watchdog group to monitor future board actions. They rewrote the bylaws, this time with full community input. And when the new elections came, Mark didn't run. He didn't need to. He'd already done his part. Instead, he helped others campaign, mentored candidates, shared his story. And when the new board was sworn in, they invited him to speak. He stood at the podium, looked out at the crowd, and said, "This isn't about winning. It's about waking up. About remembering that we don't just live here, we belong here. And no board, no rule, no gavel can take that away." The room erupted in applause. Mark stepped down, binder tucked under his arm, and walked home. The swing set creaked in the breeze. Dana waved from the porch. The kids laughed in the yard. Peace had returned. But it wasn't the same peace as before. It was earned. HOAs were designed to protect communities. But when power goes unchecked, even the quietest neighborhoods can become battlegrounds. Mark's story isn't just about fines or bylaws. It's about standing up when no one else will. About documenting, resisting, and refusing to be silenced. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to back down.